Hey folks, Wren here, and today we're going to do my May wrap up. So, for May, I think I've had one of the best reading months I've ever had. I read so much, and a lot of it was some really good stuff. To be fair, a lot of it was manga, but I'm in my manga era, and I'm having a great time. So, in May, I did DNF one book, which is like saying a lot. Like only one, I'm pretty proud of that. So the one book I DNF'd was Beauty Queens by Libba Bray. I got 50% of the way through that, and I really just I didn't care. It was very humorous, and that's not usually my vibe. So I DNF'd that. But I did end up reading 35 books, which is awesome. I had 13 5 stars, 15 4 stars, 3 3 stars, 2 2 stars, and 2 1 stars. So that's pretty interesting. And that came out as a 4 star average, which is really, really high. And I'm really happy about that. So I had 30 physical books, 1 ebook, and 4 audios. It's the most physical books I've ever read. But again, a lot of those were manga. I definitely had such a good time reading in May, and I have found some of my best books of the year and some of my worst books of the year. So it's really a collection of different types of stuff in May. So the first book I read was The Lake of Tears by Emily Rodda, which is the second in Del Toro Quest. This was very nice to read. Like, I don't know how else to describe it, but nice. Del Toro Quest is such a fun middle grade fantasy series. It's got all the classic elements of a fantasy and some bits that are like really interesting. The world is pretty in depth, and I'm interested in that. And we have different creatures, and our characters are interesting. So I'm really intrigued to continue on with this series, and I can definitely see why it's so beloved by everyone. I ended up giving this a 3 star, not because it was bad by any means, but because it is a more juvenile middle grade. So I don't know, I'm nearly 30. It's hard to give those kind of books really high stars. But I did have lots of fun, and I'm really looking forward to continuing the series. Look at me trying to emulate Max and do some drawings. So the next book I read was episode 13 by Craig DeLuey. This was one of my most anticipated books of the year because it's a paranormal investigation show. That's all I want from everything. So the way I keep describing this book is that it's a found footage horror film in a book. And that really is what it is. This book is just mixed media. There is what are they called? Transactions, translations, whatever, of the videos that were taken. There is journal entries and emails, and it often says, film footage from this date and, this many hours type thing. So it was really cool to have it all split like that. We have our main characters investigating a very haunted house, and they were doing a bunch of research, which I love. But this took a really different turn. It wasn't the normal haunted house story. The ending was interesting and not necessarily in a good way. So I only gave it 4 stars. Then I read What I Mean When I Say I'm Autistic, Unpuzzling a Life on the Autism Spectrum by Annie Kotowicz. This is very much more of a biography than anything else. It does try to give some kind of helpful tips and knowledge about being autistic. I didn't really gel with this. I think my brain didn't like the way this was set out and how it was written. I just really did not like it. My brain was not having a good time with this. And I think that's just a way that you can see the differences in people on the autism spectrum. It didn't work for me, but the author said this was how their autistic brain said that the book should be formatted. So, differences like that. Look at me trying to draw a rocket ship. It did not go out very well. But I gave this 2 stars. Wasn't for me. Then we have the book that I just won't really shut up about because it's Horror Hotel by Victoria Fulton and Faith McLaren. Because, oh my, this was again one of my most anticipated books of the year, and it's definitely going to be my worst book of the year. This was awful. These characters are idiots. They moved a dead body because they didn't want anyone else to see it first. Who does that? These teenagers are idiots. They were meant to be filming a haunted house, a haunted hotel type thing for YouTube. Oh my god, it was awful. And so disrespectful to Elisa Lam, which is what this is taking inspiration from. I say inspiration, but it really did just completely copy the Elisa Lam story, which is not a good thing. It got 1 star, and that was me being generous. So then I read several volumes of Blood on the Tracks by Shuzo Oshimi. This is a horror manga series that has the most beautiful art style ever, but it is messed up. It is a mother and son relationship, and it's a time. There's nothing much more I can say. It's just give it a go, because it really gets inside your mind and stays there. But these were all awesome. I gave all of them 4 stars. Next up, I finally finished a book that I had been partway through for 2 months, and that is Claimed by the Orc Prince by Lionel Hart. This is the first in the Orc Prince trilogy. So this was a arranged marriage between an orc and an elf, and they are both males, so that was really awesome. I enjoyed this, but there were definitely some things that just didn't really click with me. So I love that our orc is like the shy one, and he's so sweet and kind and just nervous, and our elf is definitely the more assertive. They took a while before their relationship really got on even footing, but when it did, it was really good. I liked them as a couple, but there was a size kink thing that I was just not happy with, so that got a 3 star. I can't do the size thing. Mm. So then we have, without a doubt, my best book of the year. It's gotta be. And that is What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. I am obsessed. Obsessed. And thank you, Paige, for gifting me this book. It's amazing. I'm so obsessed, guys. So, the thing I always want from horror books is hauntingly beautiful, and that is exactly what this book is. It's got things to do with spores and how those spores are interacting with the surrounding forests and the people, and some weird stuff is happening to people inside this manor, and our main character is non-binary, and they are a total boss when it comes to dealing with these things. And it really hooked me immediately and hasn't let go. And I'm so hyped for the sequel. But yeah, this is obviously a 5 stars. Best book of the year. So next up, I read Playing with Fire by Derek Landy, which is the second in the Skullduggery Pleasant series. I definitely enjoyed this one more than I did the first book, and I think that's just because I'm now more familiar with the characters and the world, but I had such fun reading this. Skullduggery is just an interesting character. He's so funny, and the relationship he has with Valkyrie is the best snarky relationship I've ever come across. And I'm really just sticking around for them too, because they're amazing and I love their dynamic. But the world is also really interesting. I love the different types of magical creatures that we get to interact with and how they are different from what you would normally expect, particularly vampires. But there is some really amazing characters in here, and I can't wait to read more of these stories. It's such a fun time. So this one got a 4 star. Next up, I read The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. This book, wow, it is a time. It really, really hit hard for me, and I'm sure it hits hard for a lot of other people because it really is talking about regrets and how those regrets have shaped your life and how dwelling on them really doesn't change anything. And you can think about, oh, what if I had done this instead of this? Maybe my life would have been better. But there's a chance it could have been worse. And it really helps you appreciate what you have in your life. But this was a really hard book to get through. Like, as someone with depression, it was hard, but it was really amazing. So this did get a 4 star, but in reality, it's like a 4.5. Next up, we all know what it means when I split a page in half with washi tape. So that means more manga. So I read volumes 2 and 3 of Yu-Gi-Oh! By Kazuki Takahashi. I read this for nostalgia reasons, because Yu-Gi-Oh! Was my everything when I was a kid, but I never actually read the manga. And the manga is very different from the show. I did really enjoy the manga because there is a lot of getting back at bullies by making them play a game where they lose and there are consequences. So that was really interesting, but I'm not going to continue because the nostalgia's in the show for me. So they got a 4 and a 3 star. Then next up is Ex Yakuza and Stray Kitten, Volume 1 by Riddle Kamimura. This is my new obsession. I am obsessed with this book. It is so cute. The kitten is scared of this guy because the guy looks kind of creepy and he says things in mysterious ways. But the guy just wants to, like, help the kitten, and he's like, here's a warm blanket for you, here's some milk, and it's adorable. I love it. I want to read all the series right now. So that got a 5 star. It's so good, guys. So next up, I read Black Internet Effect by Siobhan Charles. This is a really short book, and it's very much more of a biography or memoir than anything else. But it was really interesting how Siobhan continuously stood her ground. She was the first Black woman in many tech companies, and, she made her stance. And it was really amazing to read. So that got a 4 star, and I'm really interested to read more of these books. And then I read Lady Justice, Volume 1. I don't know who it's by, but it's not Neil Gaiman. And this sucked. It was just the same story told 5 different times, and none of them were good. I can see why this had such a low rating. And poor Neil Gaiman for having to have his name on this comic. It was awful. So next up, I read volumes 3, 4, 5, and 6 of Cells at Work by Akane Shimizu. I'm so sorry. But this completed the series of Cells at Work for me. I love Cells at Work. It's so fun and so interesting to learn about the human body in such a digestible way and an interesting way. So it really hooks you by all of these amazing characters just doing their job in the human body. And I love it so much. So all of these volumes got a 5 star. I'm obsessed. Can't wait to read more of the different Cells at Work. Then I read Augie and Me, 3 Wonder Stories by R.J. Palacio. So this was a bind-up of 3 short stories in the world of wonder. So we had a chapter from Julian, we had a story from Pluto, and one from Charlotte. So this kind of ruined Wonder for me, honestly, because the chapters from these 3 kids, it was really all about how much their lives sucked because they knew Augie. And that's just awful. Because it's like, a kid laughed at them once and suddenly their life just sucks because they know Augie. Or everything's just so much more difficult because, they have to be friends with Augie or they have to do something with Augie. I'm like, you don't get to do any of that. Augie is the one having to be Augie, and he doesn't shy away from, who he is. But all of these kids are just kind of really, really awful. And it sucked. And I did not have fun. So this got a 2-star, and I kind of wish I never read it. Next up, we have one of my favorite spreads, actually. Also, my favorite manga series of all time, and that is Soul Eater by Atsushi Okubo. So I read volumes 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, and 25. So I've now completed the Soul Eater manga series, which is sad because it's my favorite ever. But oh my god, this was giving me so many emotions. I loved all of them. The final volume had a bit of fan service for no reason, so that kind of ruined some things. But this series is amazing. It is about death and death's weapons and death's kid coming into their own. And oh my god, Death the Kid is everything. And Black Star is everything. Also, these black dots are because in the show, or in the manga, there is a thing called black blood, and it looks like that. So that's why that is. So I then read Spellbound by Ali Theron, which is the first in the Magic in Manhattan series. Now, this was a reread for me, and I wanted to reread this so that I could continue on with the trilogy. And I did reread it, and I had a good time. This is a paranormal-esque book set in the 1920s where people have certain abilities, and our main character can see the past of an object if he touches it, which was super interesting. And then he forms a relationship with this man who is kind of trying to stop certain evil people from getting their hands on magical items. It's really fun. I gave this 4 stars, and I'm looking forward to continuing the series. Next up, I read The Consumption of Magic by TJ Klune, which is the 3rd book in the Tales of Verania series, and I finally read this. Oh my gosh, I have been trying to read this book for, I don't know, 5, 6 months, and I wasn't not reading it because it was bad. It was amazing, but, TJ Klune just has... I'm kind of scared sometimes because he has a way of tearing out your heart. My heart was not torn out in this, but this was really great. I maybe didn't like this as much as some of the others because this is definitely more focused on Sam as an individual instead of having the whole gang together and them going on adventures. But it is really interesting to see Sam come into his own. So this got a 4-star, and I am definitely looking forward to continuing the series. Then the last book that I read in May was Iron Widow by Ziran J. Zhao. I had a really good time reading this once I got into it. It was really hard for me to want to read it, but then once I did, it hooked me. So I gave this a 4-star. It had some really interesting world-building things, but I didn't care so much for some of them. The mecha part of it, I liked, but I also didn't like. It was a weird time. I did enjoy the characters, and our main character being such a kind of a morally grey character was really fun. I adore the polyamorous relationship. It is the best, and I do really love it. But there were definitely some things about this where I just didn't care. But it was still good. So those are all of the books I read in May. So I had a lot of good reads, a few not so good reads, but overall I think it was a great month. So let me know down below how your reading went in May, and thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.